Hey everyone. Today, again, we have Jeff Nash, the CEO, co-founder of Bridgemark Strategies, just to discuss the red hot M&A market that's out there right now. It's constantly in news publications, and it seems like all you're seeing every day is firms getting, 12 to 15 times plus EBITDA valuations and 5 times revenue valuations. And, sometimes that's very much reality. And sometimes, that's very much not the case. And just today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about, number one, what we're seeing in the M&A market. Number two, what some of the recent changes have been. And number three, maybe just discussing a few alternatives out there for advisors that are potentially looking for some monetization, but really aren't willing to give up that much of the control of their business yet. So, Jeff, I really appreciate you hopping on the podcast today.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. Thanks a lot, Corey. Thanks for hosting it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jeff, obviously we talk on a regular basis. Our team is constantly talking. I know we've done, quite a few large scale transitions this year. We're in the middle of many, many more. What are some of the things that you think listeners might want to know about the current M&A market?
Well, number one, it's as hot as it's ever been, and I would say it's even hotter than it's ever been. I was just looking at some statistics earlier today, and the forecast here is that this year will be a record year of M&A transactions, both on the larger end as well as on the everyday advisor end. So we're just seeing a more and more volume, and as number one, so it continues to be hot. I would say some other trends that we're seeing is younger and younger advisors are exploring M&A, where we actually have advisors in their 50s and even now starting in their 40s as leaders of organizations exploring M&A. And it really becomes that of a merger. They're recognizing that the platforms of some of these PE-backed RIA firms have a better tech stack, a better overall platform, and can actually help them grow their individual business, but most importantly, grow their income and service clients better. And so we're seeing a lot of that in with reasons for these transactions is, again, they've built a great platform that's creating a great platform to service clients, and having advisors who've built a great business tying into that has really become a win-win. So that tie-in, of course, the firms themselves are growing, but then the advisor is able to grow their business within the firms, and then they have a share, they own part of the share, they become shareholders and partners. And again, it's just the whole thing keeps growing. So number one is the hotness of the marketplace, and I'd say number two is the youth that we're now seeing it. This was started off, I think, as a placement for older advisors looking to retire, and it's really not the case. It's really younger advisors who are looking to certainly monetize and de-risk the business, but are looking to continue to grow the business and being able to do so on potentially a better operating platform.
So walk us through that a little bit, because I'm starting to have those conversations with the other day. A really good friend of mine, he's in his early 40s, just knocking it out of the park, growing 25% per year. He has around a $4 million trailing 12 revenue business. And he told me the other day, he said, Corey, I don't know if I'm ready to do this, but I also don't want to miss the boat. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly we can't predict the future of how long this is going to go, right? I mean, no one knows. But from what we're seeing, there's a ton more consolidation that is yet to happen in this industry. So I certainly think we're going to be seeing another 5 more years of massive growth in this consolidation. But the opportunity for that advisor with that growth is you're joining a firm that takes your growth and supercharges it. Most advisors, even successful advisors that are doing $4 million, right? What they're doing right now is they're growing their business with net new assets. And they're solely responsible for that growth. It's not necessarily a team driving growth, it's they're solely responsible for that growth. And everybody else underneath them becomes the beneficiary of that growth. What happens in a lot of these larger organizations is the growth comes in really two, three, even four different parts of the firm that we're seeing. And so I think about this as flying an airplane. And when you're flying an airplane, if you've got to fly an airplane with one engine versus an airplane with four engines, an airplane with four engines is likely going to sustain itself longer through the growth cycles than an airplane with one engine.
Mhm.
So that advisor you described, if he's the sole engine driving in new growth, then that's great as long as he can continue to do that. And he's going to continue to make more money. He's going to continue to build a great firm. These RIA firms that are larger in scale and often PE backed, they tend to have as many as four engines. And the four different engines that they have, number one is they're acquiring businesses clearly, right? That's what we've been talking about here. So that's one of their engines is just pure acquisition growth. Another one of their engines is they've tied into many of these custodial referral programs where they're actually getting leads from custodians that they're giving to their advisors. And that's another engine for growth. And we know some of these engines may or may not be as good in any one given year. But overall, that's what you have as a four-engine plane. Another third engine is, again, would be individuals, right? The firm itself is going to have their business development people focusing on growth and driving new business to the individual advisors. And the fourth engine is the advisor's individual efficiency. So your friend that we talk about, he's not only the rainmaker, but he's also running the business. And running the business is a time constraint. Well, if you can take the running the business off of his plate and just become a rainmaker and give him more time, he will be more efficient and he can generate more business. So what you end up with is really a comparison of four engines for growth versus one engine for growth. And that's kind of long-winded answer, but that's where we're seeing a lot of younger advisors are recognizing that to get to the next stage of their business, they may actually have to invest more money, spend more time, right? And maybe not actually make more money while they're going through a growth phase to then get to the next stage of their business. And they could just partner with a firm that will do all those things for them. And now they've got the firm driving what would be equity value, right? The value of their equity is the value of their own business versus the value of the business they join, driving that equity growth. So that's the trade-off is where am I in my business cycle? We're growing, we're having a lot of fun, but do I need to invest in the business, actually potentially make less money as I'm investing in the business, right? Who do I need to be hiring? What do I need to be doing to invest in the business? And what's the right time to look at partnering and just de-risking the business and joining it with a larger firm?
That's a big part of that people don't necessarily understand when they start taking a look at this process. They see these top line valuations either on revenue or EBITDA and get really excited about it, but they don't realize that after they transact that, they're at a 35% payout and, still need to figure out a way to have enough cash flow to, keep things going inside of their daily lives. And, a big part of this process is not just chasing the money. It's truly like finding that 1+1 = 3 scenario. Yes, you're going to be at a 30% payout, but if you have the ability to, instead of grow at 15%, to grow at, 30, 40% per year, obviously not as much as an issue if you're a younger advisor.
Yeah, it's exactly that, right? I mean, that's what we look at from when we're trying to make matches, right? We focus heavily on the three F's that we've talked about so many times, feel, fit, and financials. And we know a lot of advisors in the industry don't fully evaluate feel, which is culture and alignment, philosophies, the fit of the business and the financials of the transaction. They overemphasize on the financials. And even some of the investment bankers that we've seen that are out there, our true quote unquote competitors, they lead with financials where we lead with the culture of the firms, right? Trying to find that right alignment. We know a lot of the buyers, when they're looking at a younger advisor like that, they're looking at them as a future leader inside that organization where they could literally be giving them a territory. If they want to be part of a recruiting emphasis, they want to be more than just an advisor servicing clients, they can have a seat at the table. And
Yeah.
these aren't small firms either. These are 15, 20 plus billion-dollar firms that are willing to have, a $4 million, $400 million advisor have a seat at a leadership table upon the transaction, right? They're looking for that as they continue to build out their companies.
Hey, breaking in real quick. As always, thank you so much for listening to my podcast as you explore your transition options out there in the marketplace. If you're a high performing financial advisor and could use somebody as a guide and a resource, I'm a non-biased, independent transition consultant that can help make this process so much easier and streamlined for you. And one of the biggest benefits is I cost you absolutely nothing to work with me. Please feel free to call, text, email, DM me. My contact information is all over this episode. I really look forward to talking to you soon. and I'll let you get back to it. So, Jeff, I think you hit on something really solid there when you were talking about, how we focus on, the fit and the culture, prior to financials. Obviously, when you're selling your business, financials and your legacy and creating generational wealth is very, very important. But can you just talk about how our process is a little bit different versus some of our competitors out there when we're helping an advisor, find a potential partner to merge?
With advisors that we see, right? And these are firms that typically larger than 250 million in assets. We're going to go through this process. And our focus is to really help make sure that the firms that we're kind of identifying, right? So our initial process starts with getting to know the firm itself, right? So the financial advisor that might be wanting to monetize or sell or merge their business, we're going to do a thorough assessment and understanding of what their financials look like. We're going to do a thorough assessment of what their goals, short and long term are, understand the people that they have on their team, the opportunities, the strengths, the weaknesses, et cetera. And as we do that, the next step of the process, I think, is what's unique to what we do. We actually take that next step and we kind of use that information to start curating firms that we think will be the right types of firms for that advisor. And we actually set up interviews with those firms. And what we have found is these initial interviews with this just a Zoom call is goes a huge way in actually narrowing down the field of highly qualified, curated solutions. In short, what we find is the buyer meets the seller and they can often like each other or not like each other. And in the not like each other saves a whole lot of time because even if that seller on paper might, or that, excuse me, that buyer on paper might put out a whole big giant offer, if they don't like each other, they don't like each other. It's a waste of time and energy for everyone. But what typically happens is though they actually like each other more often than not. And when that's the case, now the buyer becomes more interested in creating a better offer, right? Because they know there's a lot of synergies. They know the businesses are going to align. They know the philosophies are going to align. And the buyers actually put out a better offer. We recently had a situation just like that where buyer and seller love each other. The buyer went through their kind of normalized process around the initial offer. And we told the buyer point blank, their initial offer is just way too low. It's not even a counter offer. It's just way too low. And we're going to use that to eliminate them
Yeah.
if they're not going to adjust their offer. So they asked us for some guidance. And we said, yeah, but to clear, we're not negotiating. We're just telling you, while the seller liked you and you liked them, we have to eliminate someone along the way. And by eliminating people along the way, we eliminate people that might have an offer too low, or maybe the seller doesn't really love the buyer or vice versa. Those are the ones we're going to eliminate early. Ultimately, you got to get to one. And this particular case, the buyer was kind of flabbergasted and is rerunning all of the numbers because they really, really like the seller and they do not want to be eliminated on price. And they told us point blank, we do not want to be eliminated on price. We really like this particular seller. And so by having that initial introduction, with that initial conversation, we're actually able to kind of build that bridge to not exclude somebody on price, right? And vice versa, where buyers will exclude sellers on price, sellers will exclude buyers on price when you're missing what could be the better fit, which is the whole culture. So we spend a lot of time on that in curating solutions, and we have found our clients have gotten some phenomenal offers, and they've been very happy with the kind of the partnering and the solutions as to how it's played out.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of the same in the recruiting world as well, Jeff. Focus on philosophical fit, business fit, find the right firms that are going to best complement you for the future. And then from there, typically it seems like the financials tend to fall in place many of the times. And if there's the right connection, they're able to, offer a couple extra turns for the right type of advisor. What a lot of financial advisors don't know, I know this is a big mistake that a lot of financial advisors I see make in this process. They don't really realize in this process, you're not just selling your practice and leaving a year later in most cases, especially not for top valuation. I mean, this is potentially, a partner that you're going to be with for, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And the fit is just going to be so important through that process. We talked about this earlier this morning, Jeff, but I told you there was an article in FA magazine that said they surveyed 331 financial advisors that have transacted in the last 5 years to see if they were actually happy with their merger. And a little bit more than 50% of them that were less than pleased with the merger. And I have a really strong hypothesis there that, a lot of that was just due to, chasing economics and not doing a lot of due diligence on the front end on the actual fit.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're pretty, pretty strict, pretty adamant, and we talked about. I mean, this is a one-way street, right? I mean, you're going in and there's no way out, and that's how you want to think about these. And it's really important to make sure that all those boxes are checked. When we talk about recruiting, one of the things that as an evaluation tool on recruiting is one of the things when you change broker dealers or change RIAs or change platforms, all of that kind of connects to recruiting, and technology is an incredibly important piece because you use that every single day. And so we encourage advisors to really dig into the technology to see if it's going to work for their business. Is it going to work for their clients? Is it going to solve their needs? Is it going to enhance their life? And so that's an area we speak to. In the M&A space, one of the things that we talk about in great detail is just the overall portfolio management. Many of these RIA firms that are doing the acquiring, they're going to control and own the portfolio management. And so you're giving it up as an advisor, and advisors are often very passionate. Even though those advisors are planning centric, which they are, and that's a big driver to valuation, by the way, is being planning centric. Overall portfolio management and approach is a philosophical approach, and that is really critical for some advisors. And so we really encourage advisors to dig into that and make sure they understand how does the firm handle portfolio management? What's the pricing structure on the portfolio management? Passive versus active. There's all kinds of different nuances. And that's an area where advisors could certainly be more upset after a transaction if they hadn't dug into that.
What are some other things? So portfolio management is a big one. What are some other ways that a lot of these strategic acquirers differ?
It's really what's your overall role and how do you build your team? So what we've seen from building a team perspective, there are some of these firms that look at your team as being your team, which is makes a lot of sense. You've started the team, you built the team, most advisors really love their team. And after the transaction, your team stays as your team. But that's not always the case. Some of these firms have identified a ways to be more efficient with the teams, and they call that more matrix management. And matrix management means that your team is actually not your team. And the team is now the firm's team. And so you may have another team inside of the firm that loses a client service administrative person. And the firm decides to take your client admin, client service associate, and move them into another financial advisor's team because they need it that way, right? There's a shortfall and they need that. So you lose control of a lot of that. And some advisors may say, that's great. That's a promotion opportunity. Might be that the case, or I'm a team player and that's great. Other advisors are not going to like that at all. And they're going to say, no, no, this is my team and I'm going to want to continue to own and control my team. So when you start looking under the covers, again, another area where if you joined a firm and it's matrix management in that firm, and next thing you know is your client service people that are in your office and you're in the East Coast somewhere are actually supporting somebody in the Midwest because that's where the need is, and that person has high turnover or whatever the situation is, right? That's going to be something that, again, probably post-transaction, you're going to be answering not overly satisfied with that.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
So that's another big area.
I know some other one or brand. Some are gonna want you to, roll up into their brand. Some are gonna allow you to keep everything the same. Some are gonna want you to outsource the marketing. Some people are gonna let you, do things the same. Technology. Some firms are, they're based off of Orion or Black Diamond or Addepar or use eMoney and maybe not the financial planning software, that you're using. So all of these things can be, especially if you've been doing things the same way for, 30 plus years, could be some pretty significant changes. The extra economics might be worth it, but changes nonetheless.
Yeah, and that's where it really becomes important to dig into what we always talk about, feel, fit, and financials, right? It really is important to dig into the culture of the firm, right? And how they think about the business, how they think about the clients. The fit itself, the technology, the tools, the resources, there's a lot of little nuances to all of that stuff. How is the firm growing? What's the firm's track record on growth? What's their history on growth? Is that sustainable? Is it continuable? Right? All of those things are big, important factors.
For sure. For sure. So, I mean, Jeff, one thing I've been running up against, quite a bit. I've had people that have, taken a look at the mergers and acquisitions market. They've took a look at the money. They took a look at the long-term economics. And for one reason or another, personal preference have just said, hey, I'm not quite ready to, merge with another firm yet. Whether, it was personal reasons or they felt like they had a lot more growth before they decided to transact, whatever it was. Just to where the market is right now. I mean, there's definitely still some ways to add a significant amount of cash and liquidity to your business without transacting. I mean, Jeff, we also do an equal amount of work on the recruiting side. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the independent recruiting deals that are out there right now and how they're, maybe close to replacing some of the deals we've been talking about in this podcast?
Yeah, certainly. And I think we're candidly one of the only firms, maybe the only firm in the industry that does a lot of volume on both the M&A and the recruiting side. So it's kind of scale on both. Typically, we're running across the bankers on the M&A space, and then we're recruiters on the recruiting side. And I haven't run into a lot of firms that do both. And I think it helps us with helping our clients because a lot of times advisors don't know what they want. And I mean, I think about the last transaction that I just closed, which was a 650, almost $700 million firm that came to me as a potential recruiting, looking at maybe establishing their own independent RIA, maybe changing broker dealers, and they ended up transacting. And so it was really, and it's just a great solution for them in what we were able to discover. So, but I think what you're talking about is really timely. I've been in this business for a lot of time, long years, right? Over 25 years, over 30 years in the industry, but over 25 years in doing the kind of recruiting stuff. And for a long time, what we would say about wirehouses, the big firms, Merrill Lynch, UBS, Morgan Stanley, is if you're there more than 10 years, then the firm's taking advantage of you financially, right? Because the way the deals were structured is it made sense to switch firms every 10 years, get a new 10-year deal, which was upwards of 300%, because your payout's the same. And you can amortize a 300% deal over 10 years. And even if you don't get all the back ends, you're still getting upwards of 200% on the front ends. And that's another 20% payout, over 10 years that makes your economics favorable. And if you're there longer than 10 years, then you're kind of the firm's winning. And if you're there if you move around every 10 years, you're probably going to get a better tech stack, right? There's advantages to actually being refreshed every few years as well as the financial. And the same has now become true in the independent space. For years and years and years, the independent space, the upfront money went from literally when I started 1 to 2% of revenue to 20 to 40% of revenue to now we're seeing 100 and in some cases upwards of 200% of revenue on the independent side. And when you start looking at that math, some of the same holds true, which is you can literally monetize your business and maximize your economics and potentially the fit as well, right? So we talk about tech stack because a lot of firms will fall behind. There's a leapfrogging that we see in technology worlds. And so you can enhance your technology, you can enhance all of your solutions and your economics by looking at making a change. When we see independent firms that are offering 90+% payout and offering transition deals that can be up in more than 100% of T12, and we've seen them where they've gotten closer to 200% of trailing 12-month revenue. It's a great way to partially monetize the business. It's a great way if you have an older advisor and a younger advisor who doesn't want to sell to help the older advisor kind of younger advisor start to monetize the older advisor. There's a lot of built-in solutions that you start to see with the transition deals that are happening, which is really what had happened in the wirehouses for the last 25 years. It's now happening in the independent space.
Yeah, I mean, just to give a real life example to it, I'm speaking with a younger 40-year-old $2 million producer right now, has 300 million in assets, and he's getting an offer for like close to 150 basis points of his assets under management. So he could transact right now, maybe get $8 million, lose a little bit of control and all of the ownership of his practice, or get $4.5 million to move to an independent platform where he's still at a 90% payout with 100% ownership with still the ability to transact down the road. So 7 years ago, this simply just wasn't something that was feasible because, the offers weren't anywhere close to having it make sense. But just due to all the things that have been going on in the industry with private equity and firms trying to capture, some of the top talent and potential defectors from, firms like Commonwealth, it's the ability for all independent advisors to get some of the highest upfront offers that have ever been in the industry. So it's benefiting everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that you said that's really true on this stuff is, and we see it in the M&A space, we see it in the transition recruiting space, is the higher quality practices, the higher quality businesses, the numbers are really astounding. Where in the M&A side, we're seeing, what we used to, they're all functions on multiples on EBITDA, right? But you can run the math, and if you do a 10 times EBITDA, and you're on a 50% EBITDA, then that equals 5 times revenue. It's just kind of a simple math problem. And so a lot of us like to talk about, at least I'd like to talk about revenue just to kind of, it's an easier math because everybody understands revenue.
Yeah.
And we're seeing deals that are 5, 6, and even upwards of 7 times revenue on the high quality businesses. We're seeing some incredible deals in the M&A space. And what you just talked about is upwards of 2 times revenue on the transition space. Again, these are for the higher quality businesses. And it's just incredibly opportunistic for those businesses right now. The firms out there in the independent space, and this could be for wirehouse advisors looking to go independent. This could be independent advisors for looking to change. This could be younger advisors who want to monetize and partially monetize their older partners, and they still own 100% of their business. And they could even transact, and like you said, they can transact again in the recruiting space. You know, what we are seeing is these deals, if these firms are continuing to grow, right, these deals will amortize and you're going to be free and clear to be able to monetize the business again without restrictions with these recruiting trends.
100%. It's crazy to see and we're seeing it every day. It's incredible.
Each new one in the recruiting space kind of scratches your head. But on the flip side of that, I've seen some recently that are just middle of the road, right? And so it really has to be for those practices that are almost entirely fee-based, with kind of rep running model portfolios. Those are the practices that are, growing businesses that are really the most sought after in the recruiting space. And they're the ones that the numbers look amazing for those folks.
I love it. Jeff,
Yeah.
I really appreciate the time. This was super, super valuable today. I mean, as you can see, both on the mergers and acquisition side or just moving from independent broker dealer to another, the opportunity has never been better. And just to recap, there's truly no one better equipped to be able to talk about both sides and how it could potentially just fit into, the 5, 10, 15-year plan of your practice right now. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. And we're always here to help out any way that we